Good morning, everyone. Today we've got a fairly interesting question for you. We're talking about which gods can actually die in their respective mythologies, because we all know that in-game, every single god dies except Sylvanas. Starting off with the Celtic pantheon. The Morrigan heavily contributes, if not is responsible, for Cuchulain's death, who dies at a pretty young age. Now, the special thing about Cuchulain is that you might be able to not necessarily consider him full god, purely because of the fact that his mother was immortal, but his father was a king. And I'm pretty sure the other gods of Celtic mythology can die as well, because his father himself was a god. Sometimes he was considered a storm god or a god of brave warrior hero sort of god. When he catches one of his wives sleeping with the son of Dagdar, he not only slays the son, but is then later slain by at least 3 other gods or men. And so yes, the gods of the Celtic mythology can die, or at least I would think most of them can die. Now, when it comes to Chinese mythology, there are definitely gods or godly beings who are capable of dying. Al Kuang is one of them. Nizjar is another one. The actual immortals, the genuine gods who are separated from a lot of the other beings of Chinese mythology, Shunga, Houyi, Nuwa, those characters specifically partake in certain activities that restore their immortality, like the Peach Banquets, for instance. They have ways of maintaining their immortality, so they in fact can't die. And then there's characters like Sun Wukong who have abused methods like this to acquire and then sustain an immortality of his own. Certain gods will not be able to die, as far as the mythology is concerned, but certain other characters that have been put into Smite, like say Daji for instance, are susceptible to death. Now moving on to Egyptian mythology, pretty much every god here is capable of dying. Certain gods in their prime, like Ra for instance, might be far safer from death than a character like, say, Anhur or Sekhet, but when it comes down to it, Osiris's death proves the mortality of the rest of the gods, I think, fairly well. Now, you could argue that Ra himself and Khepri could be exempt from this because they're connected to this supreme deity of the pantheon being Amun, but for the most part, the Egyptian gods are concerned with dying, at the very least, or can be concerned with dying, which is pretty unlike the Greek god pantheon because they don't need to worry about death on the whole. Of course, Medusa would have to concern herself with it. Achilles would have to be concerned with it as long as he's just talking about his ankles. Or perhaps old age as well. Probably not, but perhaps old age. But most of the gods in the Greek pantheon, more or less unkillable, or at least just immortal. They eat ambrosia to help sustain their immortality, sure, but they're still more or less immortal. Very similar to the Chinese gods. Now moving on to the Japanese gods, in the last video that we made, we discussed how most, if not all of these gods are connected in some way. You could make arguments against Kuzembo's connection, but pretty much everyone else is connected and they're tied to the same family. And Izanami, the mother of all of these gods, died terribly. She was burnt to death and sent to Yomi. Now, she was sent to Yomi. It wasn't like she was completely removed from existence or anything, but she couldn't leave Yomi because she ate food there and she was trapped and all of that sort of thing. She might have been able to be removed and revived if she hadn't done that. But these gods can still die. They can still be removed from the current plane of existence and put into the underworld. So yes, the Japanese gods can indeed die. The same thing with the Mayan gods. Xbalanque ends up dying. The lords of Xibalba are all slain, so that includes Camazotz and Apuash. Cabrakan is taken out as well. So these gods aren't exactly immortal, but they do have a few ways of getting around the afterlife or coming back, as Xbalanque did when he ended up beating the gods of Xibalba. And just like with the Mayan pantheon, the Norse gods are also not safe from death. The only one whose immortality you could truly argue for is Ymir's, but in terms of the experiencing the process of death, pretty much all of them can, with the exception of Ymir and Ratatoska. Ratatoska might be a special case as well, but everyone else should have some concerns when it comes to the force of dying. Same thing with Pele. She's slain in a few myths from Polynesian mythology, so I'm assuming a good number of those gods could probably perish. As for the Roman pantheon, pretty much the same as the Greek pantheon. They're more or less the same gods. There are differences, of course, but generally my answer is the same for the Roman pantheon as it is for Greek. When it comes to voodoo gods, Baron Samedi, as far as I know, Baron Samedi is immortal. And because he's a lower spirit, he doesn't have a very tangible or a body that can be interacted with. So as far as the ways he would actually be able to be killed, I think those are exclusively preserved for Bondi himself, the supreme god of the voodoo pantheon. So he might have a way of taking out the Baron or the other lower spirits, but through his influences and maybe some other supreme god from another one of these pantheons, I don't see the lower spirits from the voodoo pantheon being removed from life anytime soon. With Chernobog, I don't think he was ever necessarily ended, but rather he was locked away or contained in some way, but never truly died. So I think as far as Slavic mythology goes, you might have some gods that are capable of dying, but you'll also have gods like Chernobog, his brother, who most likely cannot die. Now, finishing things off with the Hindu pantheon, the original gods that are gods, like Vishnu, Brahm, so on and so forth, characters like that, I know they're not in Smite, but just bear with me here. They can't actually die. They are genuinely immortal, and they have the ability to bestow immortality upon other beings or reincarnations of other characters. Kumbhakarna could have received immortality that way, or at least a more godly status that way. But characters like Ram, for instance, could probably die. The demons that exist within the pantheon can die. And that was the video. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and if you did, go ahead and leave a like. If you disagree with me at all, if you think certain gods can actually die that I mentioned, or vice versa, let me know in the comment section below, and hey, we can talk about it. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. But until the next video, have a very good day. I've been Prime, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.